Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. And Into the Afroverse is where we're taking Black folks into the future. As we're starting off the new year, first of all, I would like to thank everyone that's been tuning into the Afroverse for the past year and a half now. I am always pleased to see the feedback that we get, the emails and so forth, the comments on social media. I just want to thank all of you for continuing to tune in. And here on Into the Afroverse, one of the things that I always like doing is introducing new people to the audience. And today's guest is another one of those new people I'd like for you to meet. Yvette Kendall is an American novelist and screenwriter from the South Side of Chicago, Illinois, but now calls Atlanta, Georgia her home. Kendall is the author of The God Maps. And actually, we're going to talk about it. That's what attracted me to when I saw that some time ago. So we're going to talk about that. The God Maps, Volume 1, the first installment in the trilogy. Because of her specific writing style, Kendall went a step further and created a new sci-fi subgenre called biblical futurism. Now, I'm definitely going to talk about that because that has me intrigued. And this genre has attracted a whole new audience to its unique category. She is also the creator and screenwriter of a new social justice horror thriller called North, which has also been turned into a novel, another one of her genre-bending originals, The Revelation Activation. However, her most notable accomplishment to date is that she signed an option deal to turn the God Maps into a mainstream television series of the same name. God Maps Volume 1 is available where all books are sold. And with that, I would like to welcome Yvette Kendall. How you doing today?
Hello, thank you for that introduction. That was awesome. I'm great.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, yeah, so like I said, one of the things when I first uh kind of picked up on what you were doing, I came across God Maps some time
Mhm.
ago, and we had actually talked about this. I was working on setting up a comic convention
Yes.
prior to, before COVID and everything fell apart. And when I came across God Maps and I looked at the concept and all of that, I was like, oh, I got to add this to come out. And we were working on it. And of course, COVID happened and it did what it did. But thankfully, you're able to come back. And what's great is you have even more things to talk about with us today. So before we get started to your most current work, and I always do this with my guests, can you give us a little bit of your origin story? Like, how did you get started and end up where you are today?
Okay. All right. Well, like you were mentioning, I'm from the South Side of Chicago area called Hyde Park, and I always kind of elaborate Hyde Park because that's where the Obamas come from. Oprah Winfrey, Melanie Hobson, she's married to George Lucas, I believe. A lot of good people in the industry. Terrence Howard is from Chicago, and amongst other people, come from this area or adjacent to this area. So I'm from there, and I now live in Atlanta. And prior to me starting to write, I started writing in 2018. I was a product developer. I had filed about 42 patent pendings thus far. And I just got tired of the rat race of trying to defend your intellectual property from being stolen by big corporations, which is, what is done to
Mhm.
people who cannot financially defend their patents for whatever reason. And I was walking through my living room, and this story fell in my head. I mean, just kind of plopped in there, and it was for the God Maps. And I wrote the first 12 pages and started showing it around, and people were saying, well, we really think you have something here. Stop showing it to people.
Right.
I kept saying, well, I'm not a writer. I just came up with a really great concept. I don't know the first thing about writing a book, and uh, all the different steps, and how do you get it from your head to paper to book formation to get it, printed and into stores. So I was very intimidated, and I kept trying to give this story away, and I kept trying to partner with people that I felt were already writers within their own right.
Mhm.
And for some reason or another, these people kept, oh, I have other things to do. I got bigger and better things to do. Good luck with it. And God just kept giving me more and more of the story. So I wound up writing the God Maps. It's almost 400 pages, but I wrote it in 6 months. And I think within those 6 months, I took a couple months off. I mean, this information was just pouring out. And so I wrote it, and it wound up being a really, really phenomenal book. And just to quickly tell you about it, it is about 5 French scientists that work in a lab, like a basement lab of a really well-known university. And they were doing these, kind of out of the general scope experiments for not only the university, but for other large corporations, figuring out things that they couldn't figure out. They work for NASA and Lockheed and all these other companies. And one of the scientists in their group asked kind of, where do our souls go when we die? And they didn't mean that necessarily in an esoteric way, like heaven or hell or blah, blah, blah. They understood heaven or hell, but they wanted to know the actual latitude and longitude of heaven and hell. Like, are these real locations that can be gotten to once a person expires?
Right.
And they decided to create all this wild machineries and these capsules and these pairing systems. And what they in essence created was a GPS system for our souls. So people would come voluntarily to come die in their labs, and they would get in this pod, and they would have a biomechanical mist blown up their noses, which because they felt the soul is somewhere in microtubules in our brains, just waiting to be activated upon death. And this mist, this biomechanical mist, which is called a ruvion, would attach onto their soul material. And once that person expired, it would basically float with the soul wherever it went to. And the monitor pairing system was able to watch that soul that is now tagged with like a serial number that is visible on the screen, and watch the soul go in our universe and outside of our universe and see where it ends up. And they wound up doing hundreds of thousands of people, so they could justify the quantify the information that they found. And they found a lot of things that you would not believe
Wow.
because of this system. So it's a real fascinating story.
So hold on. So first of all, did you hear what she just said? A soul GPS. That in and of itself, that story alone, that part of the story alone, I'm just blown away by. And then for you to just come with some more stuff, microtubules, and that is awesome. That is incredible. Before we
Nerd
go,
central over here.
and let me get this straight. You were sharing this idea with people, and they were telling you, "I'm gonna get back to you." They didn't have time.
Oh yeah, I shared it with one particular guy. He did comic books,
Right.
and he called himself, a self-proclaimed uh a self-proclaimed writer.
Right.
And I was like, hey, if you could help me do this story, you can co-author it with me. And this guy blew me off 40 going north.
Wow.
Uh, and I just was like, you know what? It just is meant for me
Yes.
to, God kept saying, this is for you. I'm giving this information to you. I'm making it easy for you. And he did. He wrote, I mean, it's stuff in that book that's so powerful. I wound up meeting an astrophysicist on LinkedIn while I was just about completing writing the book. And I let her read some of it when I wrote some things about black holes and things in space and stuff. And she says, you know what, you've written something that NASA wants to study. What you wrote in your book has real life implications.
Wow.
So can we study this when you're done with your book? And I was like, I made all this stuff up, but okay. So I wound up writing that I went back because I wasn't done with the book completely, and I wrote the conversation I had with the astrophysicist in the book, coming from the main character, because it was such a profound conversation that I was actually writing things that I thought was fantasy that actually had real life implications, which that's how I knew
Right.
that God was speaking to me, because I have not that this means anything, but I have a high school diploma. I have never been to college. I have never taken college classes.
Wow.
I this is just my imagination doing what it does. And it wound up being just really seminal,
Right.
to not only, myself, but to other people. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm a big believer in sometimes, not knowing kind of removes limits on your thinking. And sometimes when you have too much of a background in something, it can be limiting because you have these rules and you have these ideas that already exist. And you're saying, well, this can't be done. This doesn't make sense. So that is
Right.
incredible. So if you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. We're taking Black folks into the future. And we're talking to Yvette Kendall about God maps. So before I go any further, based on that description alone, I'm sure folks are listening and they want to get this book. How can they get it? Where can they get it?
It was being sold in Barnes and Noble physically. I don't know if they still have any, but you can go anywhere: Amazon, Books a Million, Barnes and Noble. Just Google the God Maps Volume 1 by Yvette Kendall, and my name is spelled Yvette, Yvette Kendall. And you can secure a hard back, I have paperback, and I also have the audio book as well.
Excellent.
And
And what if folks want to reach out to you for a speaking engagement or to have you come out and do a book signing? How can they find you?
I am on Facebook. I'm still super duper old school. I'm on Facebook. I am on Instagram under my publishing company account. It's called Stravard Lux, or you can go to stravardlux.com or YvetteKendall.com, and you can just leave a email there, and someone will get back to you to set up whatever needs to happen for a speaking engagement.
Excellent. And I'm assuming, you tell me if I'm wrong, what you're describing in terms of the contents of this book is part of what you refer to as biblical futurism.
Yes, it is biblical futurism.
And can you please give us, I don't want to make any assumptions, but I
Yeah.
want you to explain to us, what do you mean by biblical futurism?
So biblical futurism is a genre that I created because of the God maps, because it didn't fit in any of the existing category. So biblical futurism means to give sci-fi explanation to biblical allegory. So I'll give you just a quick example. Um, Everyone knows that you cannot look at God in his face and live.
Right,
It's not something we're able to do, but no one knows why, other than to say, oh, it's God and you're not supposed to, and he won't let you survive that. But now here is where biblical futurism comes in, because now I'm going to give a sci-fi plausible explanation
got you.
to why you cannot. So one of the things is our eyes individually sees 2D. We
Mhm.
go into two dimensions. So if you cover one eye, that only sees two dimension. You cover the other eye, that only sees two dimension. But if you put both eyes together, we get a 3D dimension visual. And you know how if some people are presented with the visuals of strobe lighting, it will cause seizures
Right,
in some individuals because of that activity. So in the God maps, I say, what if God's vestige, the way that he looks, is in 33rd degree? then us as regular humans with our only capability of seeing 3D, looking upon him would be disastrous to something that we physically cannot behold.
Right.
So that is biblical futurism giving a sci-fi explanation to biblical allegory.
Makes sense to me. That, that's all I can say. That is incredible. That is incredible. And you say you have no background in science per se or anything like that. These are things that you just thought about and came to you.
Yeah, I just make this. It sounds good and fascinating. I make it up and I write it down. There is no people thought after reading the God maps because it is very scientific, even though it's entertainment. There is a lot of science in this, very plausible science. They thought that, it took you 10 years to write this and you had to, do all this research. I didn't research not one thing in that book. Everything was, oh, it sounds good. I'm writing it down.
That is incredible. So, so what has been the response? I'm gonna put this into two categories, just from your general audience, how people receive the book, and from the religious community. How do they, or have you had the experience of getting responses from the religious community when it comes to biblical futurism?
Yes. So I'm going to give you a few different scenarios. So I have a friend that is sanctified.
Mm.
I mean, just run of the mill, follow the book. If God didn't say it, it didn't happen. I refute everything else. And I asked her, I said, would you just please read this book? And after badgering her, she read the God maps, and her response was, this book needs to be paired with the Bible.
Wow.
That was her I was shocked. And then other people started saying the same thing. And I was like, really? So that's what I've been getting from the religious community. So just people that do not read sci-fi or they're light sci-fi readers, they absolutely love the book. I can tell you now, they have trouble with the first two chapters. And the first two chapters, because I'm creating a universe that does not exist, and they're doing something so audacious. It had to be scientifically explained
Right.
what they were doing. So once you get past chapter 2, it's smooth sailing into the story. So a lot of people's like, I love it, but oh my God, the science that's in chapter 1 and 2. So I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But nerds who understand science, they absolutely love it. And the what was your other question? You asked about the
Just the broader audience.
Oh, the broader I sell so many books in different countries, especially France, especially Germany. Um People globally like the book.
Hmm.
Um some people won't read it because they think is a Bible thumping book just by the title.
Right.
They think it's Bible thumping, and then some people uh won't read it because they think is too dense of information. And I think that if you just give it a chance and just read it, you won't. I've had people pick up the book, and again, it's almost 400 pages, and they like, I just spent my whole week, just I didn't do nothing else but read this book.
Wow.
I could not put it down. And it is very uniquely written. I guess the style that I write in is very multi-styled. I don't stick to, because I didn't know how to write a book. I didn't know what the rules were. And I think that was the best thing that I ever did, was not go, oh, are you supposed to do this? Because now it's in a genre all on its own.
That is awesome. So you just created your own rules, your own
Yeah.
genre. And like I said, that's one of the great things about what I like about doing this show is having creatives like yourself that are thinking outside the box and creating new spaces for people to delve into. So I think that that is awesome. You know, when people create, they leave a little bit of themselves in their creation. What did the process reveal to yourself about you? And through reading this, what do we learn? but also like what are we learning about you as a creator and as a person?
I learned I learned so much about myself because I had so many questions about God and his process and the rules that we understand God to be and the things that we don't understand. So I learned from writing this book that God is not a he can't be encompassed, and it gave me a closer relationship not only to him and understanding him a bit, but it also made me I used to be terribly afraid of death. And after writing this, I have no fears. I think what people fear is the process in which they die and not necessarily death itself, if
Right.
that makes any sense.
No, it perfect. It makes perfect
Okay.
sense.
Okay. So I just, anytime someone talked to, spoke about death, I didn't want to talk about it because everyone has to go that way. And I didn't know what was on the other side. And I didn't know this and I didn't know that. And as people read this book, someone from the New York that wrote for the New York, I don't know if it was the New York Times or whatever. He was retired at the time, but he says your book is like the second coming of Dante. And when he said that, I was spent. I mean, Dante has formed every religious imagery
Right.
that we enforce today for the entire world.
Right.
That's something to say. He says it's like a millennial Dante. So I just was I never know, but what it did, it empowered me because I kept saying you're not a writer, you can't write a book, or you just did it this one time. And I realized I've been a writer my entire life. And it started giving me perspective. I was winning poetry contests in the second grade. I was winning spelling contests. I was 2 years ahead of everybody else in my grade for reading. I used to have to, when I was in sixth grade, they would send me up to the eighth grade reading classes every morning because I was so far ahead of my peers. And I said, oh my God, I've been a writer my entire life. And I never knew. I wrote contracts for other people. I actually wrote my own patents. I didn't even have to go to a patent attorney. And
Wow.
even still, I never said, you're a writer. So this process told me what my calling was. Even though I thought it was everything else under the sun, I found out who I was.
Yeah, and I talk about this a lot because I'm a big believer in this, that we all are something and we know what that thing is.
Mhm.
And when we embrace it, that's when we have our greatest success.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I think when we go against it,
Mhm.
that's when we cause great stress.
Yes.
So I'm so happy that you were able to embrace your calling. I won't say find it, I'll say embrace it. And you've created this thing that, the world is talking about. Um, so in terms of this book, and believe it or not, we are actually coming up on the end of this segment,
Ooh.
but because it goes quick, like I always tell folks when I have these great conversations and I'm enjoying the guests, it goes so quickly. Um, so Hollywood is calling. Have they called? What's been the response in terms of taking it beyond the printed page?
Well, like I said, I wrote the God Maps in 2018. It
Mhm.
was published in 2018, and by 2019, I was contacted on LinkedIn by an executive producer of Lovecraft Country on HBO. He had been there for, at HBO for 24, 25 years or something. And he offered me a TV series for the God Maps. And that was a couple years ago. And our deal is still kind of going back and forth, but yeah, it went quicker than I expected as far as someone noticing it and it being picked up. And the same thing is kind of happening with North, except it was interrupted by the writer strike and things like that. So anyway, I don't even know how much time we have left, but yeah, we should
Oh, we got to talk about North. If you got time for another segment, we got to talk about North. So, because yeah, we didn't even get to the latest work. I'm, still fascinated about the first one. So I can't wait to hear about what North is about. And I'm sure folks that are listening to Into the Afroverse can't wait to hear about it either. So we are coming up on the last 5 minutes. So for this segment, what would be your final words to us? What would you like to share?
I would like to share. It's so many people that are afraid to start something because they may be, of a certain age, or they may come from a certain place, or not have a certain background in something. And I encourage you to just do it. And the people and places and things that you will need to catapult you further, they will just magically appear. I am a firm believer. If you build it, they will come. I don't care what it is. So you have to start building for people to join in and assist you of, to getting to where you need to be. So because I'm 52. So that is a lot that I'm doing, that, I've ventured off into comic books. I've ventured off into creating the soundtrack and music for some of the shows and movies that I'm creating. So creativity knows no bounds. Even if you feel you don't have that experience, you have to try it before you can, do an official ruling of what you can and cannot do.
Wow, awesome words to end on. So, real quick, one more time, where can we get the book and how can folks contact you directly?
Yes, if you want the book, the first thing you can do is Google Yvette Kendall, or the name of the book, The God Maps Volume 1, and it will show you everywhere it is for sale. But you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, even Target carries some of my books. So anywhere online, you can Google my name and the title of the book, and it will let you know everywhere you can buy it. And it is at Audible as well. And if you want to find me, you can go to stravardlux.com, or you can go to Instagram at stravardlux. And also I'm on the TikTok thingy. So, Yvette Kendall, sci-fi CEO. You can find me there. And on Facebook, I am Yvette Kendall, the scribe.
Excellent. So that will about do it for another episode of Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. And Into the Alphaverse, we're taking Black folks into the future. Can't say thank you enough to today's guest, Yvette Kendall. And like I said, I'm opening the door for you to come back, do another segment, because like I said, we didn't even talk about your newest stuff. And I know folks want to hear about that as well. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in as we start off the new year. Uh, I just want to say thank you for making the last year and a half here on WOL so successful. And I've just enjoyed your feedback, and I've enjoyed doing the show. And people often ask, how can they support the show? What can they do to keep us on air? And first of all, thank you for all of you that have been donating to the show. If you go to afrofuturismnet.com, you can see where you can how you can donate to the show there. And also, if you've missed any episodes, you can check us out on YouTube on the Afrofuturism Network channel. So one more time, thank you to our guest. Thanks for tuning in, and a special shout out to Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Have a good day, folks, and take care.